So in attachment, it's very important for us to know, because the reason we grieve how we grieve is because of the attachment. So we're going to go to slide number 1. Slide number 1, we talk about the attachment is the emotional bond that forms between an infant and a caregiver. So at the birth, you come out of the womb, and when you having the attachment with your mom, you start the emotional attachment. Let's say if your mom is like responsive and caring, your attachment is going to look a little different. If your mom is a little distant, not necessarily responsive and caring as she maybe that you want her to be, your attachment is going to look different. So that's why we want to explore it, because how you attach in this time right now to someone is the same way that we want to explore how we need to attach to get to the process of grieving. Make sense? That makes sense? So because in attachment, the process of grieving is key to form another attachment to other people, or another source. There has to be another source that you attach yourself to. So attachment provides the infant with your first coping system. It sets up a mental representation of the caregiver in the infant's mind, one that can be summed up as a comforting mental presence in difficult times. So this is infant, this is the baby when she comes out, because when we think about a baby, are babies helpless? They're super dependent. So when we come out in our minds up into that time frame, when we're getting fed, washed, taken everywhere, we're attaching at that moment. That emotional attachment is taking place. We begin to recognize how we're going to get our needs met. Attachment allows an infant to separate from the caregiver without distress. So if I attach to my mom, let's say I attach to my mom in a way that was securely, I'm going to be able to separate from her without distress and explore the world. Like if we say, Ava, if she was walking and she was attached appropriately, Ava, right? If she was walking and she attached appropriately, you can see her walk out of here and begin to explore with not worrying about where her mom was in this moment, because she was attaching appropriately. Make sense? All right, we're going to look at the next slide. Attachment at the early age of 6 months, the infant can anticipate. 6 months is so amazing. At 6 months, they know how their needs are going to get met at the 6 months mark. So that's wired in their brain. We're talking about the brain wiring of us, because we're all started off as babies. So at 6 months, we knew how our needs were going to get met. So our primary figure that we attach to remains crucial for approximately 0 to 3. 0 to 3, during that window of time of our lives, we are attaching with somebody that means something to us, a primary caregiver. Whoever that person is, if you're thinking in your mind, who was my primary caregiver during that time? That's the person that you attach to. Attachment is determined by the caregiver's response to the infant. How did your caregiver respond to you when you were an infant? That put that programming in your mind during that time. A child learning is based on how they were handled and how the caregiver acts towards them, not on what the caregiver says. So during the time when you're an infant, it doesn't matter what your caregiver is actually saying. It's about how they're attaching to you, how they're responding to your distress. When you cry, what are they doing? Are they ignoring you or allowing you to, or they running to you and trying to comfort you? That right there, that's you're learning how to attach in those moments. All right. Easy enough to know when you're attached to someone, because you know how you feel. When you're apart from that person and being an adult, you put your feelings into words and describe how it feels. So everybody knows how it feels to be attached to someone. So in the separation, in the moment of the loss, you know how it feels to be away from that person. And that's when you're starting the grieving process, when you're away from the person. There are 4 attachment styles, and we're going to dig into those. They're secure, they're anxious, resistant, avoidant, and disorganized. Today we're going to talk about all 4, but at first I want you to ask yourself a question. Think about the availability of your primary caregiver. Just think for a moment. Where was your primary caregiver when you were growing up? Were they neglectful? Were they always there? Or were they inconsistent? Those things are going to matter as we go through the attachment styles. Oh, sorry. I'm on slide 6. Who did you, sorry, I got to keep in touch. I'm sorry. Who did you go to when you had a problem? Think about that in your attachment style. When you think about those questions, who did you go to when you had a problem? Did you try to figure it out yourself, or you just try to be independent? Was there someone there that you could really count on? Now ask yourself those questions, because this is going to help you explore what kind of attachment style do you have at that moment of time. Because of whatever attachment style you have, that's how you're going to be formulating in your grieving process. Because if you didn't have those things like you needed, you're going to be struggling a little bit in your grieving process because you never got some things that this person that you're grieving probably bought, that security and that safety. So now we have to relearn how to get those things again. We have to relearn how to attach, because of what was programmed in our minds, we attached in a certain way. So now we have to reprogram our mind to attach in another way. All right, we're going to look at the first attachment, which is the most healthiest form of attachment. It's secure attachment. We're on slide 7. Secure attachment. Secure attachment is the healthiest form of attachment. It occurs when the mother responds to the emotional needs of the infant in a loving and consistent way. Anybody here when we're thinking about your needs, did you think about, yeah, I did. I had a secure attachment. Did anybody say, oh, I have a secure attachment? I didn't have a secure attachment when I was reading through it. Children with a secure attachment use their mother as a safe base to explore their environment. They're moderately distressed when their mother leaves the room, separation anxiety, and seek contact with the mother when she returns. Secure attachment has a lasting impact on the individual. By growing up with a sense of stability, care, securely attached with children, find it easier to investigate and interact in the world. Who fits in the category of a secure attachment just by reading the definition? And this is the healthiest form. Think about it. This is the healthiest form of attachment. And don't feel bad, because the percentage of people that have a secure attachment is less than 50%. Less than 50%. So secure attachment is hard to establish, and think about the time that we're in now. Parents, if you're in a 2-parent household, even in this time, most likely both of your parents are going to work unless you're fortunate to have a parent home with you during that time all day. Most time, majority of households now are a single-parent home. Single-parent home, one parent is working, so she's providing or he's providing all the attachment needs. And they're providing all the attachment needs. Somewhere they're missing the mark. So it's just impossible. It's impossible to provide all the needs of someone in this stage. So the secure attachment is something that we want to aim to create as adults. We want to aim to get our attachment back into a secure way as adults. And how is that? Next slide. We're going to look at basic trust. See, when we are infants, at 6 months old, this is so key, because at 6 months old, you start learning how to trust. When I cry, is my bottle going to be there? Am I going to get picked up? If those things are not taking place, that leads me to not trust. And even at 6 months old, remember that, 6 months old, I'm learning. I can anticipate how they're going to meet my needs. Let's say if you started the style of just, the new style is like letting your child cry it out and figure it out. So if you're starting that style at 6 months old, they have figured out, after crying for how long, whatever time you allow them to cry, that you're not going to be there for them when they cry in that time. So they're internally going to start figuring things out on their own at 6 months old, when they're created to be dependent. 6 months old, we are created to be dependent. So what we want to do is start learning as adults basic trust, which serves as basic for all future emotional relationships. So we want to trust people in an emotional way to meet our needs. How hard is that though? Is that something easy? Can we really trust people to meet our emotional needs? Is that an easy task? After learning that maybe So after learning how to not to rely on yourself, you have to unlearn that skill and learn how to trust others. And one of the key things is developing intimate relationships. I mean intimate, I don't mean romantic intimacy. I mean friends. I mean allowing people to see inside you. Learning to be transparent and learning to be vulnerable. Because as we learn those things, we're developing secure, intimate bonds. And we need the emotional bonds so we can be able to flow in a healthy form in relationship. We have to maintain emotional balance, feel confident, and good about ourselves. The view of yourself matters in this time. You don't want to see yourself as less than, and we're going to talk about how that less than can come in another attachment. Enjoy being around others. Rebound from disappointment and loss. Explore their environment with feelings of safety and security, which leads to help. And one thing we have to remember about feeling safe and security is that first has to be internally. It's not necessarily their environment. You have to feel the safety and security within yourself. And getting the place with feeling the safety within yourself is just working through your their emotions that you're having. If I'm having emotions as far as like sadness, I'm having all these wave of emotions, that makes me feel that I'm insecure emotionally. So we want to ground ourselves emotionally. And also we want to develop the next slide. We want to develop the ability to control behavior, which results in effective management and impulses of emotion. Create a foundation for the development of identity. Identity is big. With secure attachment, you have to work on who you are, knowing who you are with secure attachment. You're going to flow through a little bit better if you have that knowledge of who you are. You want to create a foundation for development, and you want to have self-worth, balance, and dependency and interdependency, because we want to depend on other people. We don't want to have the weight of the world on ourselves and try to figure it out all the time. Yep. We don't want to try to. Can I talk about this? We don't want to try to figure it out all the time. We want to trust others to help us figure it out. We want to establish a moral framework that leads to empathy, compassion, and conscience.
Keep talking.
We want to generate a core set beliefs.
Just in case.
Okay, thank you. So we want to generate a core set of beliefs. What is the core belief that you believe within yourself? What is that? What does that look like? What is that you're built upon? Make sure that you can look at that. And you want to provide a defense against stress and trauma. How do you build a defense against stress and trauma? You have to build up yourself in all these other areas, emotionally building yourself up in all these other areas. Anybody already there in that secure attachment now? When you think about it, are we all in the same place that we need to start working in that area? The next slide. Anxious resistant. This describes a child who is frightened by separation and continues to display anxious behavior once the caregiver returns. So this is when you're feeling that separation distress when your parent leaves the room and you don't know how to self-soothe. You just you get anxious, like you cry, you whine, you throw a tantrum, you don't know what to do in those moments. That's that anxious resistant attachment. And most times that comes when caregivers are inconsistent with parenting patterns. One day they could be all loving and nurturing, the next day they could be all dismissive. So it that their inconsistency causes you to have that anxious style. When we want to make sure in that time right there that we're recognizing when those things are at play. Because most of the time when caregivers are functioning in that way, that inconsistent, they're not necessarily recognizing the damage that they're actually causing by them being inconsistent in their own emotions. Make sense? Caregivers may also be inconsistent in responding to signs of distress in the infant. For example, not picking up a crying baby to avoid spoiling the child may actually lead to development of anxious attachment towards the caregiver. Remember, I don't know if you heard of that, like, I know back in like the country in those times, they'll say like, don't pick the baby up too much because you're gonna spoil them. But that right there actually creates within them an anxiousness because you're allowing them to figure it out on their own. We don't want kids to figure it out on their own because they're helpless. We want to help them, give them what they need. And the thing they need in those moments is that nurturing. Next slide. So the anxious resistance adults, they seek high level of intimacy, approval, responsiveness from partners, being overly dependent. They tend to be less trusting, have less positive views about themselves. And that positive view, having less positive views about yourself, actually comes from that childhood. Because when your mom says she loves you in one moment and then the next moment she pays you no mind, you get confused about your self-worth. So in those moments, when you're seeing that happen as an adult, you have to go back and recognize who you are. That's when we want to go back, having the ability to recognize our emotional maturity so we could be able to challenge ourselves to change from those places. May exhibit high levels of emotional expressiveness, worry, impulsiveness in their relationships. So how do you respond in your current relationships? Think about now. How do you respond? Are you emotionally expressive, worry, impulsive in their relationship? Those are signs of that anxious resistant behavior taking place. Have not been able to develop sufficient defenses against separation anxiety. When people leave you, it alerts something within you that now I'm being abandoned. So that separation anxiety is still in play. You haven't learned to self-soothe as an adult. You had it taking place, you were crying at the door when mom left, and that still is happening internally within you now. So we want to make sure we start working on that by building our emotional ability to handle when things are taken away from us. We're not seeing it as we're being abandoned, just people are leaving. We look far away into things. Most of anxious resistant adults are those overthinkers that we think about every little thing, and we're not allowing things to just happen. We're not present in the moment. We're just overthinking. And then in relationship-wise, we look for avoidant partners. And we're going to talk about it again because those avoidant partners, they don't offer much emotionally for us. So we look for those partners to help us kind of cope with the need because they need you just as much as you need them. Next slide. Any questions so far? You guys are quiet. Yeah. So the next one is the anxious avoidant attachment. Refers to a child who reacts fairly calmly to a parent's separation and does not embrace them upon return. The child could be internally wanting to embrace the child, but because of the fear of rejection, they don't run to the parent to embrace them. They stand back and allow the parent come in, and their facial expression, they shows no facial expression. They're just blank and flat. You wouldn't be able to recognize what's wrong with them because they could be looking you dead in the face and they won't even respond. Those are those anxious avoidant kind of attachment. Development of anxious development attachment style in child has to do with emotional availability. If you see a child that's less responsive, we want to see how was the emotional availability of that parent. Was there a lot of talking with the child, a lot of playing with the child? Because that teaches the child to kind of shut down and have an internal world that they kind of deal with things within themselves. Caregivers tend to avoid the display of emotion and intimacy, often misintuned to the child's emotional needs. Caregivers are reserved and seem to back off when the child reaches out for support and reassurance and affection. The child learns to hide and suppress. That's a big one. Child learns to go in the room and be by themselves, push their emotions down. They don't express emotions. The caregiver does not tolerate anxiety, fear, or anything. When they're verbalizing that those emotions are present, the caregiver usually tells them, stop, don't do that. It always talks them in a negative way. So the child deals with the threats and angers independently. They figure out how to deal with things on their own to avoid the frustration caused by the parent. Any questions about that one? So you can see in this one, that's why the anxious resistant partner wants this person, because this person feels rejection, so they want to attach to somebody. So the anxious resistant person wants to attach to that person so they can have someone that safety of them not leaving them. So it's twofold in that. Let's talk about the next slide. Anxious avoidant adults. They're not convinced that others would deliver emotional support. They do not trust very well. It's hard for them to trust. You can tell them that you love them, but internally in their mind, they're not believing it. You're not believing that someone is loving you. Even they're showing you in action, you cannot believe it. They maintain positive views of self based on personal achievement. It's about what they can do rather than who they are. Those are anxious avoidant adults are full of making sure that they go high in level in life they want to achieve because that gives them gratification. They defense deactivation of the attachment system to avoid potential rejection. So you're almost like, as an anxious avoidant adult, you're running away from being rejected. So you could be in a situation that could allow you to have the connection, but you will run away from it from the fear of being rejected. This is the anxious avoidant adults. The next one is disorganized attachment. The disorganized attachment, this one right here manifests our behaviors towards the caregiver upon return. They may approach the caregiver turning away or even hitting the caregiver, and may result of childhood trauma. This disorganized attachment, you're going to see this in kids that maybe have been raised in foster care, maybe been raised in an orphanage or something like that. They are going to be so detached from everything. They're not going to have ability to connect because they haven't been able to receive anything emotionally growing up. When caregivers usually regularly exist contrasting and unpredictable behaviors. The caregiver is never consistent, always showing behavior that is different from what the child actually needs. The caregiver might show contrasting behaviors towards how they parent the child. For example, they might be loving at times, but on other occasions, they might not even meet the child's basic need, food or water or anything. As a result, it creates a sense of fear within the child for their own safety. This one, the disorganized attachment, is a hard one to break from because it's a reactive attachment that takes place within them, that they lack the connection of people. So because they never had it, they lack the skills to know how to make that connection. So they tend to feel uncomfortable with emotional closeness. So they stay away from that. They don't gather where there can be welcome and love. They move away from those things. They commonly view themselves as unworthy. This comes from that mom's always been inconsistent and unpredictable, so they start to see themselves by how mom or the caregiver treated them as unworthy or responsible of the attachment. Similar to the dismissive avoidant attachment style, people with fearful avoidant attachment style seek less intimacy from attachments and frequently suppress and deny their feelings. They don't talk about anything deep, keep it very surface level. You're not going to go deep with them because the fear of rejection and the fear of having that connection, they don't want that closeness because right now it's a mechanism for them to prevent themselves from being hurt. Any questions so far? Right now we're going to go into a video. It actually shows you the attachment style that I'm talking about. It's called the strange situation. We're going to go in it and look at this video. Mom is the one in the black, and the child is the one in the pink.
Devised such a procedure called the strange situation, which places the child under some stress. It has become the most widely used standardized way to assess the quality of a child's attachment to their caregiver. Here the researchers are recording how 14-month-old Lisa responds in this attractive but unfamiliar setting. How will she react to a stranger? What will happen when her mother leaves the room? And when she returns? It's Lisa's behavior when her mother returns, what psychologists call the reunion, that they are particularly interested in.
Most importantly is to look for the type of balance that a child strikes between an attachment need and, on the other hand, to explore the head material.
Once Lisa has settled down to play, a stranger enters the room and sits in the chair reading a magazine. After a couple of minutes, the stranger attempts to interact with Lisa. Soon, Lisbeth gets a cue to leave the room. The stranger tries to comfort Lisa, but in vain. Lisbeth comes back into the room, and the camera records how Lisa reacts. Now the first part of the procedure is over, and Lisbeth settles Lisa. The stranger leaves them alone together. And soon after, it goes too. Lisa is on her own. Her distress is plain to see. Once again, the efforts of the stranger to console Lisa are to no avail. But Lisbeth manages to calm her almost at once, and shortly afterwards the observation ends.
So, did anybody know what attachment style that was? Did Lisa have? Any idea? Out of the 4 attachment style, what attachment style did Lisa have? Can anybody tell? Guess. The first one? Yep, that's right. She had a secure attachment. Why did you say that, Buzzy? Good, yep. Good job, yeah. And think about that. The attachment, if we think about it, when we go into loss, think about the attachment when it comes to your loss. You see how Lisa was crying outside the door? That's the attachment style that Lisa had with her mom. It was secure. She had the relationship there. So when now, on the other side of that, when you're dealing with loss, that's the attachment, and you're screaming. You're screaming for that bond, that emotional connection that you had. You're screaming for it. You want it so bad because you've already been entwined with that person. But now that person cannot come to you and help you in your distress. Now what do you do in that moment? Now the thing that I want, I can no longer have. We'll be like Lisa, screaming, yelling. And the key about it, did you see how the stranger tried to comfort Lisa? What was Lisa's response to the stranger? She wasn't trying, she wanted her mama. Because that tells us in the moment of our distress, we only want the thing that we want. No one else can take the replace of it. So we have to go through the process of grieving. Lisa needed to cry. She needed to cry that stuff out. And that's the same thing for us. We got to push this out of us. Because in the attachment with relationships, that's the place of our greatest pain. Relationships bring us the greatest pain, but they bring us our greatest comfort. But we have to go through the process of recognizing I lost it. But the relationship has the ability to continue on, because that Lisa mom will forever be her mom. That won't change. So we have to remember what we were given in the moment that we were given it, and not dwell on what we lost, but what we had. Wow, what did you have with that person? That attachment that you had with that person, nobody can ever take that away from you. The pain of the absence of it is going to hurt. That's the reality of it. It will hurt. But you have something from that person that you will forever remember. And we got to steward that. And what do we do with that? What do we do with it? What do we do with what they left me? Because obviously there was a great love that you have for that person, because we don't grieve people we don't love. We don't grieve people we don't love. So what do we do with the love and what that person got? It had to be a memories. There are things that you can do with what they left. But sometimes we get stuck in the physical part of it. We want that person. But we have to begin to train our brain. Now what can we do next? Because there's hope within us all. There's great potential in us. So we have to utilize that pain to take us to the place of our strength. Next slide. Any questions? Any comments? Oh, I thought. How we grieve the loss of a loved one stretches us back to how we formed early childhood attachments. Because we saw in the attachment style that in the secure attachment, we saw Lisa, she had a bonded relationship with our mom and with her mom. So now the relationship continues. Lisa will forever have her mom, but how do we move on? What's next? What does that next process look like? So right now, within Lisa, let's just use Lisa as an example because she's fresh. Within her ability, next slide, within Lisa's ability, what's activated her in the moment is that separation distress. It's activated in the moment. I feel the separation distress in time of grieving, my attachment style to cope with trauma. How do I cope with the trauma of the loss? How did I cope with other things in life? How did I cope? You have to learn how to cope. And there are a lot of things that can fulfill you in those moments, but there's only one thing that's going to work. You have to get connected to the source. Because we saw the stranger come to Lisa, right? The stranger could not do anything for Lisa. But when you connect with the source, what does the source do for us in the moment? Anybody know what the source is? What could the source be? What could your source be that can cause you to move to a place of healing? There's only one healer. So we connect to the source. Even though there's discomfort, you miss that person, now I begin to get beauty for ashes, oil of joy for mourning, garment of praise for heaviness. I begin to get the things that he promised me I would have, but I got to stay connected to the source. But sometimes we get disconnected from the source, and it allows us to get into the place that we keep our minds on us. And this is hard. Grieving is hard. I don't want to minimize it by no means. But there was a strategy given to us that we have to utilize in the moment of our loss. Make sense? All right, we're going to go to the next slide. Attachment and loss. Now we're going to get a little heavy. How are you guys feeling? Y'all okay? We're going to talk about just 4 main losses in our life, because we experienced the loss of our parents, we experienced the loss of a spouse, we experienced the loss of a child, we experienced the loss of a sibling. And we want to kind of look at what we're actually losing, looking at it from that point of view. What are we losing in attachment? What are we losing with that person? Because remember we talked about last week, the primary loss is the person. The secondary loss is what that person provided for us. I lost my aunt in 2017, just suddenly, she just passed away. In March 2022, I finally grieved the loss of her. I recognized what I lost. She brought me so much joy. She wasn't like a Christian funny, but she was funny. She was just funny. She brought me so much joy. So when I think about her, I think about, golly, I missed that part of her. But now, in the process of my healing, I have to keep moving towards the source. Because if I move towards the source, the pain may still be there, but it's going to soften as we keep moving closer. So let's talk about caregiver, losing a parent or whoever provided care to you. This is big because, as we see, it's almost like the tables turn with Lisa. Now Lisa's on the other side of the door screaming for her mom. And to Lisa, mom was a key figure in her life. Mom fed Lisa. She changed her diaper. She played with her. You saw mom playing with Lisa. Lisa received all her needs from her mom. No matter what age you are, when you lose a parent, that causes you some distress. That causes you pain because there's an emotional bond there. But let's say on the other side, maybe I lost my parent and there was not necessarily an emotional bond, because we notice the attachment style, some parents are unavailable emotionally. So that's a secondary loss. I lost my mom and the idea of what I always wanted. Now I would never get it because now my mom is gone. So now I'm grieving my primary loss. Now I'm grieving my secondary loss. The pain of my idea, my desire would never be able to be achieved. So we get stuck in that process. And next, what did mom bring for us? Comfort. Mama bring comfort. When you sick, I was 27, living in Raleigh. I wanted my mama to come up there and take care of me because she brought it comfort to me. She needed to clean and cook. I knew she was going to do it just the right way. That's what caregivers bring. They bring comfort and they bring safety, because you can be whoever you need to be in their presence and not have to worry about anything else. And they bring security, because parents, they're there. They're there when we need them. There's some people that are not there when we need them, but we can count on our parents to be there for us. So that's what we're dealing with in the grieving process. Those are primary losses. We lost our support. We lost the one that was going to be at the game for us cheering. We lost that. And we lost one thing that's big. We lost someone that's familiar. It's hard when you lose a person that's familiar, because that person brought that familiarity to you, and it felt good. And the trust is big. So when your attachment system is activated, you must utilize your skills to get to the source. What would be your source? What would be your source when you experience loss? What would be the thing that you would use? Because there's a way to get to the thing, but you got to go there. You have to get to the thing, because the thing brings you that comfort. Because when I am sad and when I am lonely, only thing that gives me pleasure is to have comfort. Where is the place of comfort? Where is your place of comfort? It may not be the same for me, but you have to find your place of comfort. You must establish a sense of safety and security within yourself. Your person loved you. Now we must reestablish that safety and security and the comfort, because now your end is not over. Your new has just begun, but you have to move. You have to move from that place. Any questions about parent caregiver before we go to the next one? We're going to talk about spouse next. When we lose a spouse, when our attachment figure, when we attach to our parents, we transfer that relationship from our parents to our spouse. Our expectation is that our spouse will provide us similar things that our parents provided. That safety, that security, that comfort, we expect that from our spouse. So when we lose that, that's a secondary loss for us in the relationship. The relationship, the person deals with the spouse provides an emotional safe haven in times of distress and a secure base of dealing with the larger world of work and social relationships. With your spouse, you can be 100% transparent. You should be 100% transparent. So when you lose your spouse, you lose that. The loss of a spouse provides emotional deregulation in times of distress and causes a person to destabilize. When we are destabilized, we have to find our place of comfort to restabilize us. Because when we lose it, we have to gain it back again, and we have to do it a different way. There is a place of comfort. What's the source? Find the source. There's always a source. You have to find the source. I have to find my comfort. I have to find my peace. Find the source. When you find the source, you're going to plug in just like we will plug in my computer, and then you're going to have life again. But you have to find your source. Where is your source at? Where is it? Find it. Any questions? We're going to move to sibling. When you lose a sibling, that's a psychological security, support, and important intimate relationship, because your sibling, let's say you didn't get the attachment from your parents, your siblings are going to be able to provide some of that attachment for you because they understand on a baseline level what you're going through. We all in the same house. We experience what you experience. We know what you're going through. So we're going to be able to relate with each other. So that brings your emotional support and identity. Your siblings give you identity because you like, that's my brother, that's my sister, that's them. We have that identity in each other. We counteract negative effects of dysfunctional attachment dynamics between children and parents in the family by mitigating effects of neglectful or abusive relationships. That means that the negative effects in the dysfunctional of our family, sometimes when we have a sibling, it makes it a little easier. They help us get through the hard times because they know everything about you, even your secrets they know because they're your sibling. They find out. And siblings are role models and a source of learning. That's a hard one because when you lose your sibling, you also lose a friend in a sense. That's like one of your first friends. You lose that. So what you want to do is, how am I cope? I have to find the source. Remember that we always have to find the source. There's no by the book answer, but finding the source, connecting yourself to the source. Only the source will get you through it. Any questions? The next one we have child. This is one of the hardest ones because it's out of the developmental order. This right here, you guys ever heard the term mama bear? So that is in you. Because as mom, you have two things. You want to nurture and protect. Now that thing is taken, when you lose a child, that's taken away from you. And guilt comes in because it's a failure that you fall upon yourself. Now you have to be reprogramming your mind based on the truth. Because truth has to sit upon you in these times and know that in these moments, the feelings of helpless and failure are due to not having what you want in the moment. I want my child. I want my child here. So when I can't have my child, I'm going to go to looking at one to blame, and you're going to blame yourself. So what you want to get into is connecting to the source. Pain endured from perceived failure to protect and nurture a child. That's perceived. Remember, it's perceived. It's not the reality. There is no failure. It is you. That is a cognitive distortion. It's not based on truth. You want to get yourself plugged into the truth and be fed upon the truth. In the journey of going through this, you have to have people around you that can push you. You have to have a source. You have to have community. This is two of the biggest things is God and community. Because you can't do it by yourself. You have to have people around you that can love you, that can hold you and push you into your next thing. Any questions in reference to that one? Those are all hard. It's hard to talk about them too. Any questions that you guys can, we're going to go through the healing journey next. All right, in the healing journey, 3 questions that we have to ask ourselves. Who am I? Why am I here? And where I'm going? And why do you think you have to ask yourself those 3 questions? Why are those 3 questions important? Who am I? Where am I? And where am I going? Why are those 3 questions important? Anybody want to try it? Because you have to have identity. Because sometimes when we lose something, we see ourselves by what we lost. You lose vision of yourself, especially as a parent. You most of the time lost vision of yourself already because you were in the role of making sure that your children had what they need. So now you have to learn to see yourself and see, who am I? Who am I in this moment? And where am I going? Where do I need to go? Why am I here? Find purpose in the moments, because you're here. If you're here, there's still purpose in you, and you have to move towards that. Moving towards that is a journey. It's not an overnight thing, but it's a journey. But the only thing you cannot do is stop moving. You must keep moving towards it. Every day, take a step. Who am I? I'm searching. Where am I going? Why am I here? I'm asking myself. I'm pondering, trying to get that information so I can start taking steps forward. Because there's a place that you're going to go, but you must move to get there. Questions? Yeah, I can do it. It's real good. Yeah, thank you. All right, healing journey. Safety and security. Remember, that's one of the main things that we have in attachment. That's what we long for. It's born within us. When we go through that factory of all we went through with our parents, those are 2 things we need: safety and security. And it's going to happen to you in this order. First, it's going to happen with God. 2, it's going to happen within self. I have to be safe and secure with myself. I have to be okay being alone. I have to be okay being around people. But I have to have that within myself to have that safety and security. And lastly, you have to have a person, or you have to have people. You can't do it alone. You're not meant to do this thing alone. So I got to have God, I got to have myself in line, and I got to have my community and my people in line so I can receive what I need to move forward in my healing journey. Make sense? Any questions? All right. This is big right here, because what happens in our journey is our thoughts produce emotions and our emotions produce behavior. So we have to make sure that our thoughts are in order in a way that is setting us up for success. What's in your thoughts? Are your thoughts producing things that's going to bring out the good in you? If your thoughts are not in order, you're not going to get to the place that you need to go. So you have to align your thoughts. Finally, brethren, what things are true? What is true in this moment? What things are honest? What things are just? What things are pure? What things are lovely? Whatsoever things are good report. If there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. Make sure you're aligning your thoughts in such a way that's going to set you up to produce. Because when we lose a loved one or someone that is special to us, our thoughts spiral out of control. If I was to drop, like if this was a roll, it would roll down. You have to catch your thoughts at the beginning. You cannot entertain thoughts because it will spiral you in a negative direction. So thoughts come, but we have to be in control of our thoughts. Because you entertain a certain thought, it can lead you in a direction that don't need to go on. So make sure that you're knowing, what am I thinking? I want to control my thoughts. I want to make sure I'm putting in my mind what I'm needing to think of in the moment. I'm going to think on what's good. I'm going to think on what's just. I'm going to think of what's pure. Because think about it. If we were to activate that now, start putting that in your thoughts. You're going to produce good emotions from that. And then you're going to produce good behavior from that. If you want to see good things within you, start with your mind. Your mind is the battlefield that you're fighting against. We talked about last week how we have to fight against that oppression. Only way we can fight against that oppression, we got to fight it in our mind. It's fighting in our mind, making sure our mind is in a way that's going to help us move forward. Because I think it's a scripture in Isaiah 54:14. It says, I can't remember what it says, but this is what, I'm going to give you the paraphrase of it. The scripture talks about how we have to make sure that we get rid of fear. Because when fear is present, it leaves the door open for oppression. So if we're not guarding our thoughts and our minds where it comes to fear, when fear gets the door open, we're open for anything to come in there that's not good. So we want to guard the door of our minds, making sure that we're thinking on those things that are good, that's not going to lead us in a direction that we don't want to go into. Make sense? All right. Next one. What is our mouth doing? Confession with the mouth is necessary. We look at this scripture. It says, I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge, my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Remember, it says, I will say of the Lord. So we have to make confessions with our mouths. We know what we do with our minds, but what are you doing with your mouth? Because if you notice, when your mouth is talking, it causes you to think about what you're saying if you're being a good steward of your mouth. You want to say, I will say of the Lord, he's my refuge. What is a refuge? That's a place of shelter. He's my fortress, a place of security. My God in whom I trust. We're aligning ourselves with him, with our mouths, our minds. Now we're moving forward. Because if we don't monitor these things, anything can come in. Make sense? Any questions? I'm at the end, at the journey, at the healing. Any questions? Anybody have a question to think about?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have more than one attachment style?
Attachment style?
Like, can you see, like, do you find yourself in, if you find yourself in multiple of the categories, as far as secure,
Mm-hmm.
the anxious, or you just like, girl, wherever most of your stuff at, that's what you got?
Yeah, you're where you're mostly your stuff at. Because in attachment style is like a personality. This is a part of you. It's like you went through the factory and got stamped, and this is you. You're functioning about that. But as an adult, you can function from a child part of you and an adult part of you, and that could be different. Because you could have came from an anxious attachment style and you're moving to a secure. That can definitely happen. Because we learn the basic skills of trust, security. We have those things as an adult. We learn to be more trusting. Especially if you're coming into the place of the Lord, you learn a lot more skills. Yes.
I heard a person once say that I think I was talking about healthy grieving or something to that degree, something in the Bible study.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about stinking thinking and stuff like that, like the difference of like when it's not becoming something positive.
Mm-hmm.
One person said to me, what if it just came?
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot what I said to her that moment, but now I want to pose that question. What do you say to a person that says, in the midst of everything that they heard, what if I can't just stop thinking about it? I can't just stop reading. Would you say that? How would you tell them what's healthy and what's not?
I think that healthy thoughts are going to produce healthy feelings. So if your thoughts are producing unhealthy feelings or feelings that are negative, that are keeping you at a place that you're stuck, that's how you weigh what kind of thoughts they are. Because what are they producing within you? Because our thoughts produce something within us that causes us to move forward. Because you understand, in life, we're not meant to be at a place that we're stagnant. We're always moving. The Spirit of the Lord moves us, and we move with him.
I think that's part of what I was saying in the Bible study, that like you find yourself still stuck at the exact same place that you were when something just happened.
Yeah.
6 months, a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there should be some type of movement.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where I was coming from.
Yeah. And
Kind of caught me off guard. I didn't know. I was like, oh boy, what did I just get myself into?
that's a good answer. But the only thing is with grieving, it has to take the clocks off the walls. You're going to just flow with what your body and what your emotions are allowing you to flow. Because what happens is, it's like a wave. You ever been to the beach? It just comes out of nowhere. And then so what you want to do is, when that wave comes, I got to be ready. I got to be ready to be able to go into my methods, my coping strategies immediately. Soon as the wave hit, oh God, I feel sad today. Like, I don't know, sometimes I feel heaviness. I'm like, oh my gosh, Lord, I thank you. I start opening my mouth and begin to praise, because heaviness, you fight it with praise. That's the strategy that the Lord has given us. So we have to utilize our weapons to fight against it. Or if not, it's going to hit you so hard and it's going to paralyze you. And you don't want it to paralyze you. Because once you get paralyzed, it's hard to get up from that place. So you want to start fighting, learning to fight with your words, learning to fight with your mind, learning to take control. Because you, within your person, you have so much control. You can utilize your skills to be in control. Yes, ma'am. Did you have a question?